All right, well, I guess this first video is titled, Is Bigger Always Better, or Do Cap Ships Get Too Much Hype? I don't know, guys. What do you think? I haven't seen this video yet, so I actually don't know. But considering that cap ships aren't in the game, aside from the 890 jump, I would say, yeah, probably too much hype. But let's see.
Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns and today I've got a bit of a thought piece, maybe that's just a fancy term for rampant speculation about Star Citizen and what I see as the cult of big ships. I'm wondering if we're falling into a bigger is always better trap, so I'm going to be playing devil's advocate and challenging that trope. Just a quick disclaimer, there is quite a bit of speculation as part of this video, so if that's not really for you then feel free to skip this one and I hope to see you next time. But if it sounds good and it's up your street, then grab yourself a cup of tea while I roll the intro, and then we'll get into it.
Lower the intro. Oh, he made his own intro music. That's kind of cool.
So you clicked on the video, but you're wondering what on earth I'm on about. Well, not only do I make videos about StarCit, but I also consume...
I don't think anybody is worried about what he's on about. I think it should be relatively clear based on the title.
Nearly everything I can get my eyeballs onto. I call it research, my wife calls it obsession, the line probably lies somewhere between the two. I also get out into the...
I need this reminder right now. Your wife is always right. Always.
Community and chat with as many people as I can, and an unsurprising theme emerges. We generally zoom in on the largest ships in the game. Broadly, ships in SC can be placed into 4 size categories. Small, so...
I think people zoom into the larger ships because they're the most expensive, but I don't zoom into the larger ships typically. I zoom into those little multi-crew ships that you can play with like 3 to 5 people.
Such as your starters,
I think that'll be the most
and
fun.
profession starter ships. Medium, usually the first taste of multi-crew action. And then you've got your large and your capital classes. There's obviously some blurred lines on the go here, and I'm not going to try and define exactly which ships fall into which category.
Yeah, is
a Connie a large medium or a small large? This exact disambiguation is of kind of limited use. The key here though is that the lion's share of excitement in SC gets grabbed by the headliners, by the monstrous capital class ships, and then not far behind by those ships pushing towards the top end of large. I also, as always, want to make this about more than just...
But yeah, they're just headlines though, right? That's the thing, is that they're just headlines. And that doesn't necessarily matter, but okay.
What we buy for dollars, yen, pesos. So I think these questions are also going to be important for anyone planning their organization's strategy of what in-game ship purchases to prioritize. Having said that, one of the big tenets of cap ship fascination is bang for buck. So like I said, I watch a lot of SE content, and one of my favourite channels is the Info Runners, so check them out if you haven't already, who really framed this concept for Star Citizen. The basic...
I mean, like you said at the beginning of this video, is it's going to be a lot of speculation. The bang for your buck conversations are built entirely on speculation because you don't know how useful these ships will be and you don't know how much money they can make. The economy in the game is non-existent. We don't know. I mean, you should be able to get all these ships in game. Why are we talking about real life money? And I don't know. I think that there's a lot of wrong with thinking that way, but okay.
Basic philosophy is that if you've put a certain amount of dollars in, it's going to be better to start with 1 or 2 large or capital ships as opposed to a multitude of small or medium ships.
What? So their thought process is that it's better to have 1 or 2 very large ships than a number of small ships? Why? Okay. You don't have to spend... So let's say capital ships are anywhere between what, $500 to $3,000. You don't have to spend that much money to enjoy the game. So you don't have to take, okay, I bought 1 or 2 capital ships. I don't have to spend the equal amount of money to get an enjoyment out of the game. And there's so many other factors that come into play where we don't exactly know what running a capital ship will look like, cost, or anything like that.
Earning potential is likely to be an exponential curve as opposed to a straight line, so the credits you could make with something like, say, an Orion should be many times greater than the credits your crew could earn with 2 moles. And this is despite 2 moles actually coming out a bit more expensive in dollar terms than the 1 Orion.
Yeah, for now.
With your increase,
like, bang for your buck, if you're an actual investor trying to make some money, buy an Orion when you have the opportunity. It's definitely going to go up in price.
Earning capacity, you can then afford to buy all your small and medium ships much quicker in-game, and this forms the basis of the earn down mantra. I'm not...
Okay, so their idea is that they think that the earning potential of a larger ship is much higher, and then you buy all the ships below it that you want.
Knocking any of...
I still think you might need a crew to do this. I hope you need a crew to do this. Thank you,
because in isolation, I do think it can make sense, but I think there are a few other things that we need to consider before we dive headfirst down the rabbit hole. I want to highlight a few potential issues that might face the owners of very large ships when it comes to day 1 of live that you might want to consider now before you join the ranks. To be clear, I don't want this to come across as a barrage of negativity against the big ships and their owners. As I started with, I'm here to play devil's advocate and question whether we're putting too much emphasis and hype onto the larger ships, while underrating things further down the scale and selling the medium ships and the small ships short.
It's funny, I don't really consume InfoRunners content because I don't think that often about ships. I don't really see the hype around larger ships that often. I do see it as a, whoa, they're big, they're cool, they do grab headlines because they're so expensive, but I don't see it like as this mega hype thing from the community as much. I wonder if that's a thing because he watches a lot of InfoRunners content, and that's the mentality that they have, is that it's a good idea to buy a really large ship, and because it has a ton of earning potential, and then you're able to buy everything below. And that's their opinion and thought process. I don't necessarily share that one, but that doesn't matter necessarily. So I wonder if it's the type of content that he consumes that makes him feel that there's a lot of hype around these things.
So first up, we've got a fairly simple one. How much use are you going to get out of your massive capital class ship?
I don't know.
This is something that I personally think applies to the large combat-oriented ships in particular. The Idris, the Javelin, the Kraken, but also to things a bit further down the scale like
the question is, what kind of content in game are you participating in with those ships? So it's not just how much money you can make with them, what their earning potential is. How fun will this actually be? I'm not sure.
Polaris and into the industrial world like the Orion. So while the minimum crew requirements of the Idris and the Javelin sit at 8 and 12 respectively,
you would hope they would
I think we can pretty safely say that they're going to go into the double digits and probably hit the 20s once you really start to factor in making sure all of your turrets are manned, for instance. A Kraken might be a little bit less daunting until you realise that that's just the carrier itself, and for it to have any real viability, you're going to need people to fly the ships on its deck and in its hangar.
No,
and this is just the crew of the ship itself.
So the Kraken, or the Kraken, I always say it wrong, is a larger version of the Banu Merchant, right? There's stores on there. There's all sorts of things that you're supposed to be able to do with it to create earning potential. And I guess the earning potential does, like he said, comes from all the ships on the deck. But those should be relatively easy to purchase in the game. So, and we're forgetting the fact that these are not solo ships. If I have a Kraken, I'm not, the goal here isn't to just earn the money by myself. The goal would be to earn money with others. So, I mean, this is my dream ship. As far as the ships that are currently in game, this is absolutely my dream ship. Is It's got landing pads, people coming and going. There's internals that are functional for buying and selling, and yeah, for the things that we've done to this point in the game, it's something that has always excited me.
So in a real-world naval setting, you're never going to see an aircraft carrier roaming about on its own. It forms the center of a fleet, including escort frigates, destroyers, submarines, and a host of logistics vessels to keep everybody supplied while out at sea. Even if you're heading down the industrial route, how safe are you hoping the space around you is if you're going to venture out into the black in your Orion? If you're envisaging you and your mates rolling out alone with a ship like that, then I just hope you brought enough credits to pay the pirates for your safe passage, and that you renewed your Space AAA membership for when you break down or run low on gas. The reality is that capital ships are likely to form the linchpins of large-scale operations for organisations or groups of players brought together by a common interest.
And like, that's how it should be. And the problem with the way the game has come about in recent years is, unfortunately, the selling of these ships to its player base has become like a big part of the funding model, right? So the problem here is that a normal organization would have worked up to this capital ship. They would have had to build it in a sandbox MMO. They would have had to earn it through questing in a MMORPG. Star Citizen, whatever kind of MMO this is you just swipe your credit card on the website and here you go. You now have the largest ship in the game, and you have the ability to run a large-scale operation from day one. Right? Yeah, we'll call it a website MMO.
Picking out your prize ship is likely to be something you do only when you've got a sufficient fleet to go with it.
So it's kind of weird.
Now, this is exactly the gameplay that I personally cover.
It would have been natural to progress into these things, and you would have already been prepared to run the large-scale thing by the time you earned one of these ships. That's not the case.
Out of Star Citizen, so I don't want to put this up as some kind of barrier. But I do want to ask if you have the people to make a large or capital ship work. Either you need to consider joining an org or building friendships and relationships with people in other ones who might be able to provide you the security to your industry, for example.
And if you join an org, most likely somebody already had one of these.
The actual coordination and organisation required to wield a cap ship fleet effectively is going to be a pretty high bar. And I'm just left to wonder how many cap ships might spend some of their time dry docked as opposed to out in the black.
Many.
Bang for buck for me is a perfectly good financial argument, but not all value is financial. It reminds me a lot of the people who buy really flashy convertibles, but it only gets used once a month on a sunny day. And fewer than that if, like me, you live in Scotland and there aren't that many sunny days.
No.
The owner then spends most of their time in a 2002 Honda Civic they bought with the leftover cash. If they'd spent a bit less on their convertible, their daily driver might have heated seats for those cold days, and provide a generally more enjoyable driving experience. No points for guessing what car's in my garage, by the way. Maybe a more tangible example of where big isn't always better though is claim times. To all the Origin fans out there, I'm sorry that it came to this, but I just need to make my point a little explosively. The 890 jump is on the small end of cap ships, but it is one, and it's one of the only ones that we have in game at the moment. But as you can see, if you have a mishap in your space yacht, you're not going to be sailing anywhere for quite a while. So that's 1 hour 7.5 minutes to claim normally, dropping to 22 minutes once I expedite, but for a fairly eye-watering amount of credits. And this is now,
How many credits?
Some of you might remember a little while back.
33,000 is not eye-watering.
Back when CIG briefly made an attempt to increase claim times. They said then it was to get things more in line with where they saw them going in the future. Now, there was a community backlash because this was all well and good in the context of a polished game, but if you were reclaiming because you just introduced yourself headfirst to an invisible asteroid, it wasn't such a good experience. CIG rode back, claim times were dropped, and we all moved on from that incident happily.
Yeah.
But this doesn't really get around the fact that claim times now are clearly significantly lower than they are intended to be in the future. And one of the reasons I encourage everyone to own a starter ship, either for cash or in-game, is because it's useful to have something you can always claim nearly instantly for a low cost and get moving.
I mean, he said this video would be entirely speculation, but we're speculating about things that need no speculation. There's facts on these scenarios. Is your ships are not going to explode as easily in the future. They're going to get damaged. You're going to repair them. They're going to be incapacitated but not exploded. So you're not going to deal with claim times as often as you do now, right? Like that's sort of what the idea is going forward. So there's no reason to use these for your arguments because it's just what it is now. And when the arguments that you're having are about the future of the game, because you're talking about capital ships, one of which on screen people have purchased but don't have in their hands, right? So you have to, if we're going to talk about capital ships in particular, and especially claim times, you have to talk about what the actual plan is and what we know. And what we know is that once physicalized damage comes in, these ships are not going to explode. Almost never. And then we just heard about the the soft cap explosions. Maybe on ships like this, it'll happen even less often, right? Than 70%. So, or yeah, the soft death will happen more often with larger ships because it should be harder to make them blow up, right? So, yeah, I just, this is one thing that I hard disagree on because there's clear and concise and understandable information out there about the plans of the game that need no speculation at all, and claim times should not be as much of an issue as Loud is making them out to be.
The Pisces may not have taken best in show, but it's got a solid place in my heart and my hangar for this exact reason. Capital ships are likely to have fairly extreme claim times and expedite costs for good reason. If, like me, you envisage huge battles between fleets in Star Citizen, then it could be quite underwhelming if that javelin you sent down in a ball
keep envisioning
of reactor death just waltzes back into the fray good as new mere hours later. Dealing death to an enemy capital should be a milestone in an engagement, and claim times that stretch into weeks wouldn't be too much to my mind. There needs to be a reason to preserve them, to defend the blasted hull in FPS combat, and to bring in your support and repair ships to breathe life back into the husk. But to get this balance, that's going to mean a hard time for any crew that has a catastrophic accident with a cap ship in the very early game. Will your org have the resources available then to come and get you out of trouble? Or could this be a case of trying to run before you can walk? In a similar vein, there's an age-old adage that you've got to spend money to make money. Yes. And ship prices in-game now are heavily discounted. We haven't had confirmation on it in quite some time, but a while back...
Did somebody say that they were heavily discounted? I don't remember ever hearing that.
CIG guided that ships were likely to be 4 to 12 times more expensive than the current prices.
Okay.
To me, capital class ships are an org ship. Much like it takes a village to raise a child, it probably takes an org to run a capital. So putting prices on these that range well into the hundreds of millions, if not billions, isn't stupid to my mind.
No.
So what could this mean if CIG implement a system of ship upkeep and maintenance like they've hinted at? So just using a fairly similar game as an example, we've got Elite Dangerous, which has its fleet carriers, and they have a system of upkeep which is based on the value of your fleet carrier, sort of how many upgrades and additions you've made to it. All in all, fleet carrier costs amount to 0.1% per week, which you have to pay in order to keep your carrier in operation. And arguably these costs aren't actually that bad. You know, if you have managed to get yourself to a point in the game by advancing where you've got 5 billion credits to sink into a fleet carrier, then scratching together 5 million credits a week shouldn't really be too much of a problem for you. But Star Citizen has a problem in that you might be starting from day one with this ship. And that just makes me wonder, how are you going to be affording upkeep and potentially things like insurance on additional parts that you've bought if that ship is just in your hangar but maybe the rest of your game hasn't progressed to the point where you can support it.
Guys,
even in the version of the game that we have at the moment, we can already see examples of spending money to make money. One of my favourite examples, I'm just going to stick to my wheelhouse completely, is just taking a look at the MISC Prospector.
Yeah.
So as per my mining guides, if you want to make a decent return on your Prospector, you're going to have to at the very least replace the mining head and the QT drive. So you've got 2.1 million credits worth of ship, but then you're going to want to outlay 23,500 credits on the mining laser if you grab a Lancet, and 17,900 will get you an Atlas, which is perfectly good for the QT slot. And that makes it a viable moneymaker, but all in all you've spent 2% of the ship's value.
I mean, you barely spend anything. Like, You barely spend anything outfitting a prospector.
If you test out some of the builds you would view as the right ones for your own favourite ship, you're going to find that they typically fall within a similar ballpark, about 1 to 3%, to make it a truly viable earner. So what if the price of components scales in line with the cost of ships, along with that 4 to 12 times indicated by CIG? And
then that would be normal, and I imagine that the economy would also scale to some extent as well. There would be a lot more things to do, a lot more ways to make money.
This circa 2% initial kit out cost applies across the board. If your ship has a list price of 500 million credits, for example, you'd need 10 million to turn it into that moneymaker that you bought it to be.
Hero.
And finally, I want to ask if you're ready to be the target that you might present rolling out with a large or capital ship in the early game.
Yeah.
I'm certainly an industrially leaning player, but that means I spend a lot of my time trying to think like a pirate. And if I were running a pirate crew in the early game, I'd place scouts at hubs and monitor for suitable targets for the rest of the crew to track and target out in the black. Conveniently, many stations have big viewing windows to watch the ships coming and going, and it would be easy to sit in a small scout in a small stealthy ship out of range looking for high signature juicy targets.
Yep.
And for the pirate crews, the bigger the ship, the bigger the prize. The deciding factor for them is likely to be a formula linking the potential rewards for the potential risks, and the potential risks won't include the risk of having too much loot. A little while back I played an open world survival MMO called Atlas, and they had a mechanic where the currency, gold coins, was physicalized along with all other resources. So if you wanted to move currency, you had to load it into your ship and set sail across the world.
Oh, that's actually cool. Atlas had so much potential, and
like in Star Citizen, it was a full PvP game, so other clans could ambush you out on the high seas and attempt to defeat you and steal anything on your boat. The game had 5 ships, which aligned well with Star Citizen's classes, even if when I played it they lacked the variety. So for the starter you had the raft, you had the small sloop, the medium schooner, the large brig, and the capital galleon. And when our clan needed to move gold and resources, we adopted one of 2 strategies.
Okay.
Either we rode out in force, mustering every clan member, ship, NPC, and cannon that we could, or we flew beneath the radar. Much more commonly, though, it was the latter. We'd use rafts and sloops, we'd dress in the scrubbiest cloth armour we had, and we'd strap on a dagger rather than a sword. And we'd set sail carrying thousands of doubloons between our safe harbours. A lot of times we'd run into other clans, but most of the time they'd just ignore the 2 noobs on a raft. They'd occasionally take the odd pot shot and shout "get good scrubs" at us if they hit anything. But for such a small prize it never seemed worth dropping their sails, boarding us and opening up our one lone wooden chest.
The difference is in Star Citizen, you could scan. And I'm curious, is every single time a Mercury Star Runner comes out, will that always be attacked by pirates? Every time a Taurus always comes out, they'll just scan you, and that's it.
In a similar way, I can see smaller and medium-sized ships being really useful in situations where drawing attention is the last thing that you want. So I hope this was an interesting vid. I want to be absolutely clear that if you're a cap ship owner, my goal here wasn't to rain on your parade. I'm purely playing devil's advocate to some of the commonly accepted mantras. And I do own a couple of larger ships myself, so these are problems that I'm thinking about how I'm going to face too. One of my favourite sayings is that happiness equals expectations minus reality, so I think if we maybe just deflate slightly some of the hype and the expectations around capital ships, then I think that would be healthy. And while there's a certain appeal to buying power in games, I think for a healthy game as well, it wouldn't be the worst thing if that power was curtailed to some degree. Yeah. Personally, I want to see a huge ecosystem of players enjoying Star Citizen, and I don't think that people who haven't spent a lot of money on the game should just be the victims of people who have spent a large amount of money on the game.
This guy is a super healthy
and I think these points are worth raising for newer players as well. There's no issue if you don't own one of these ships, and I think of all the points raised here, one of the clearest should be how much of an endeavour even getting these ships out of dock is going to be. There are going to be plenty of opportunities to get on board one that don't involve owning it yourself. And this is more and more important as we approach sales season with IAE in November. So if you did enjoy the content and you think I've earned it, You're still here, so you clearly either like it or you're giving me a fair hearing while you type a comment about sticking my body on the bow of your Kraken. Then consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel.
Alright.
And with all that said, thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Sweet. Well, guys, that was Loudguns. Here's a link to his channel here's a link to this video in particular and his channel in the chat. So make sure you show him some love. I thought that he's got a really kind of grounded thought process around the game, and yeah, that was healthy to listen to and hear about. And yeah, I mean, my closing thoughts or final thoughts around capital ships is basically I do agree a lot with what he's saying. Is there's a lot more that you're going to have to deal with these, and I also believe that, you know, the idea around them was supposed to be for a group. If you look at the original sale of the Javelin, the Javelin was supposed to be this like empty husk of a ship, because they stripped all the high end military stuff off of the ship, and then the org that you started the game with, their goal and their job was to build and customize this Javelin to your uses and your needs. So that is not what the Javelin is anymore, but you can kind of see what the original thought process was, and get a good understanding of sort of what these ships were supposed to be. Org hubs, basically like floating stations, things like that, right? So, but yeah, as always, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you check out Loudgun's channel as well. And if you want to participate in any conversation around these, you can leave a comment down below. But a better place to do it was to stop by my Twitch channel while we're watching it live, or my Discord channel, discord.gg/SaltEMike, my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/SaltEMike. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.